You're listening to the Cross-Check NHL Show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clarke.
Welcome to the Cross-Check NHL Show. I am Andrew Berkshire from the Montreal Gazette and Game Over Montreal on SDPN, and I'm joined by my excellent co-host, Mary Clarke from For the Win. We have a great show for you today because we've got reffing controversies, diving controversies, and of course we're going to look at some eliminated teams because every day more and more teams are eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's that time. The season's coming to a close. We've got just over 10 games left for each team. So it's coming to that time. But before we get into it, Mary, how's your week going so far? I know you're about to go on vacation.
Yeah. I was saying before we started recording that I'm busy trying to get ready to go away. I'm going away to California to visit family with my whole family. My sister and I are going to do a couple of days in Disneyland, and then we're going to take a train to San Diego, where we're going to spend the rest of the week. I think I said before I'm going to a baseball game, and that is like outside of that, that's all I really know. I think, we're gonna we've rented bikes, we have a car, we're gonna rent a car there, so we'll be able to do a whole bunch of stuff. But I think it's just gonna be a relaxing vacation, and that's nice. It'll get me rested and ready for the playoffs. And it's just it's good to be looking forward to something that's just super chill. I mean, the couple days in Disneyland probably aren't going to be chill, but it's gonna be fun. I've been looking forward to it for a while, and it's been hard to really look forward to it because so much has been happening. We had the Olympics, we've had a whole bunch of NHL stuff. I've covered March Madness, the trade deadline, but now all of that is out of the way, and it feels like a perfect time to take a vacation because we're getting close to the end of the season. A lot of the playoff races are pretty wrapped up, and now we're just kind of in the waning zone for the playoffs, really. And it's really exciting time for hockey because we only have a couple weeks left. And then we get to the most fun time of the year for hockey fans. And, I gotta love it. We love the playoffs, and it's great. It's a great time.
Yeah, the first round of the playoffs is my favorite time of the year.
Yeah.
It just hits different. The ramp up in intensity and the amount of games.
I was gonna say the amount of games you usually get four.
Amazing.
You get 4 games a day, basically for a week and a half or whatever, and it's just
hook it straight into my veins.
Yes, exactly. And then of course, it just feels like the games are not to say more intense at the beginning, but they're usually more chaotic in the beginning. There's a lot happening. Teams are still feeling each other out, getting used to the the playoff races and all that. And I don't know. So you're right. The first round is the best. Absolutely 100%.
And with all that said, we're going to talk about 2 non-playoff teams to start it all off, and then more non-playoff teams in the second segment.
Okay, we've talked about a lot
about the playoffs.
We talked about a lot. Yeah, I was going to say we've talked about a lot of playoff teams, from the trade deadline. We always talk about the Maple Leafs. So I thought today would be a good time to, talk about teams we haven't talked about a lot. Teams like, the Seattle Kraken, the New Jersey Devils. We're going to get into them a little bit later, but I'm not going to try and ruin your transition here, but I think the first big thing is Ottawa Senators and some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, we can go back and look at what happened, but essentially I'll recap it for everybody. Tim Stutzle and Nick Suzuki had a collision. It was a knee-on-knee collision. It was very clear from the replay that one player was trying to avoid the hit. The other player at the last second tried to not knee the other person, but the knees connected anyway. Stutzle was in a lot of pain, writhing around on the ice for a long time. Some players on the Montreal Canadiens took exception to that because he immediately stayed on the ice for the ensuing power play and did not miss a shift the entire rest of the game, but was limping to the bench or limping to the bus after the game, and is a game time decision for the Senators' next game. And I know everyone was out there calling him a diver. And listen, my opinion is it's very funny to call Stutzle a diver because the way he was writhing around on the ice. But I fully buy that what happened was he hurt his knee. It's not a major injury, but it hurt a lot. and he was maybe nursing it a little bit on the ice and then felt good enough with the adrenaline to play the rest of the game. And then the next day, things don't feel so nice. I've been there myself. When I was a younger man, I blew out my ankle completely and then continued that night to drink and party and walked probably about 5 kilometers on it. And then the next morning I woke up, tried to step out of bed, and fell on my face because my ankle was like a balloon and I could not put weight on it for like a week. So it happens with injuries. With that said, at the end of the game, when it was 6-3 for Ottawa, Stutzle was running around and going for little cheap shots. He put a cross-check into Brendan Gallagher's neck, into the back of his neck, behind the ref, and then Gallagher went after him. And listen, Stutzle is not a tough guy, but Brendan Gallagher's a generous 5'8", and Stutzle immediately turtled. And then when the ref came in and held Gallagher down, then Stutzle's gloves came off, and then he wanted a piece. So it's like, this guy is earning a reputation, right? But Brendan Gallagher, after the game, says he was very annoyed, very clearly. He says, when I was 10 years old, our coach had a rule. If you lay on the ice and the trainers or the coach had to come onto the ice to get you, you're too hurt to play at least the next 3 shifts. He's a great player. I've played against him 2-3 years now. More than half the games we played against him, he's laid on the ice and is right back out there the next shift. He lays on the ice. He acts like he's hurt. He sells the call. He's on the ice that same power play. There's kids watching. We're role models. And if I was a teammate of his, I'd tell him to smarten up. It's just not a good look. Very talented player, very good player. He needs to stop laying on the ice. It's embarrassing. So, Mary, I think first of all, do you agree with Gallagher that diving is something that like is a big issue for kids watching?
I don't think they're thinking about that, if I'm being completely honest. When I heard that part of the quote,
you think he was laying it on?
I think he was laying it on. He was absolutely
so
laying it on. And I mean, good for him, because I think the biggest thing coming from this is that, people are going to be more aware of Tim Stutzle now. I mean, Brendan Gallagher's name pulls a lot of weight. He's been in the NHL for a long time. He's a respected player. But I mean, he was clearly weaving a tale, weaving a narrative with the whole stuff about the coach his coach at the begining. Like he was clearly weaving a tale, and like, good for him. Like, I mean, you're clearly allowed to do this, and this is going to follow Tim Stutzle though. Like, people are going to be more aware of it. Refs will probably be more aware of it now too. At least that will be like the big takeaway from here at the end. But no, I don't I don't think kids watching really care about diving. I mean, maybe ask your sons who watch hockey and see if that's, I don't know. We can maybe put this to the proof here, Andrew, with your kids. But
I think they're too young to get it. But I don't think there's many kids out there who are watching that and be like, oh, I'm going to pretend I'm injured next game to get a call.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Here's my issue with the whole diving thing. Because, like, first of all, Senators fans were very upset with me because on my post-game show, Game Over Montreal, I said, like, straight up, Stutzle is a diver. Because he is. He's a diver. He embellishes all the time. And he's a little rat, too. But there's value in that. Players who do that often draw lots of calls and get the other teams off their game. It's not an insult to me to say that somebody's a diver. I know a lot of people hate it, but tons of guys in this league embellish. I think the bigger issue, and this is something that I kind of wanted to direct the conversation towards here, as much as it's about Stutzle and Gallagher and that like game that's going on within the game, and Gallagher, Gallagher essentially trying to set the stage for Stutzle being looked at more carefully by the officials. And he is, I believe, after McDavid, second in the league in penalty differential this year. So he's doing his job. But I think the entire reason that diving has become more prevalent in the game, I don't know if it's been more prevalent recently, but more prevalent than, say, 10, 12 years ago, or even 20 years ago, where like Claude Lemieux was like the big diver and everyone knew that Lemieux was the guy that dove all the time. Now, like almost everybody embellishes a little bit. What I see it as is there's so few calls now.
Yeah.
So players feel like unless they make a big deal, the ref is never going to notice it. you rarely ever see a call where a guy gets hooked and he just muscles through it that, it gets called. They'll like make the leg go limp or something, or like, or if a guy gets high sticked, if you don't react, it's not getting called. But if you whip your head back and grab your face, maybe it gets called. So all those little things that may not be falling down are still embellishing, but it's embellishing to make sure that the officials notice and do their goddamn jobs. And frankly, they haven't been. This is the lowest penalized season in history. History.
Yeah, and that ripples, like you said, like the whole officiating being bad ripples through so many things in this league, and the embellishing is a big part of that, because as you said, things aren't getting called, so players have to be over dramatic and selling things more in order to get the calls, like in order to get just calls in general. I mean, sure, maybe certain plays don't deserve calls. I've seen, I swore some really bad, like basically like a stick came up and didn't even get close to somebody, but they still reacted and it got a penalty. I don't remember who it was, but I remember seeing
it happens every few games.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, like, sure, should those be called? No, but there are a lot of egregious things that aren't called in general. So I get that NHL players are trying their best because it's stacked against them in every other, conceivable way. So like, I get it. And it's a legitimate strategy. Like, I mean, Brad Marchand is, the rat king basically of the NHL, because
rat king.
I mean, like, he is the way he is. That's his play style. He's the best at what he does in that regard. Sure, he may be dirty in some other areas, but like, there's a reason he has this reputation. But he's beloved in Boston. Like,
of course. All the rats are beloved in their home rinks, right? I mean, the thing I love about players like Marchand is this complete lack of self-awareness that they literally have to operate with in order to be who they are.
The licking thing.
The licking thing, it's stuff like you see Brad Marchand doing his post-game press conference or whatever, and he goes after somebody who dove or embellished. And it's like, bud, you're one of the biggest divers in the history of the game, and you're like, this is embarrassing. And I know people will probably say the same thing about Gallagher, but like, here, Gallagher doesn't dive. He's a small guy who goes into areas where he gets knocked down a lot. What Gallagher does do, which is not diving to draw a call, is if he gets pushed near a goalie, he will fall on the goalie on purpose. That he definitely does, but it's a little different than diving.
I was going to say, I mean, I have very little experience in this, but I was going to say it's kind of like wrestling in terms of like the like heel like nature of I mean, I'm thinking mostly of Marchand, but he almost feels like he's playing a character to a certain extent. I'm not saying that Tim Stutzle is doing this, but the most effective divers, embellishers, rats, if you want to call them, on NHL teams, really embrace that character. So it is definitely, I mean, like, everybody plays a role on an NHL team. You have, star players, the grinders, the goons, and the best ones in the NHL embrace their role as whatever they are, cast as or good at. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with Stutzle in the future. I mean, he's still a young kid. He may take this out of his game. I think he's a pretty talented kid. Probably not.
It's been so successful for him, right?
True, but things are going to change. I
so
think
many calls.
Things probably will change. Maybe not this year. Yeah. I don't know. Like it
happened
probably
to Nazem
change.
Kadri, right?
That's true.
Kadri used to be among the league's best at drawing calls, and he definitely was a flopper and remains to this day a flopper. And the thing is, I would not say that guys like Marchand or Kadri aren't hard-nosed. Just because you dive and embellish does not make you a soft player.
Oh, no.
It means that's part of your game to draw calls. It's a strategy. And when you mentioned Marchand playing a character, oh my God, is he ever a character?
Yeah.
Brad Marchand is straight out of, you won't get this reference, Mary, but he's straight out of the Attitude Era in WWE. He would be on Generation X. Maybe that's it. Maybe...
I watched the video you sent me. This is like a bit above table, but like I watched the video you sent me because I had said to Andrew that my friend was going to make like not make me, but like we were going to watch a couple of wrestling things and you sent me a video and I think it was about that. So I do recognize that name. I don't get it completely, but anyway, continue your point.
Yeah, anyway, I think maybe Brad Marchand is the, now I'm blanking on the name, the HBK of...
I do recognize that name.
Yeah, the Heartbreak Kid,
Mm-hmm.
Shawn Michaels. He's the Shawn Michaels of the NHL. Not as prolific, obviously. Not to say that he's not a star, but HBK was like the star of the WWE for
I can't believe I'm making wrestling references.
I know.
It's wild.
I know.
My friend has changed me but yes, that's as deep as it's gonna go for me because I've only seen a little bit of wrestling, so I kind of understand a little bit, but but yes,
wrestling bleeds into hockey narratives
very
well.
Yes.
I think it's the like hyper masculinity to the point of parody that bleeds in really well, and the like the NHL, like the lengths that we go to lionize people who play with injuries, and then you have like the way that wrestling has like hardcore matches and how stupid it all is. And I'm not being insulting. It's stupid fun, but that it pairs really, really well, which is why so much of hockey Twitter meshes with wrestling Twitter, which is super weird.
I retweeted something before you finish this tangent, before we move on, because I know you're trying to get there. I saw a tweet that was years old. That was like, and I retweeted, it was like, welcome to Twitter. Here's your communist manifesto and a Monday night ticket to WWE for some reason or something like that. It's like, it's perfect. That is like Twitter. That's like hockey Twitter to a T, especially with the wrestling thing, because you're right. A lot of hockey people love wrestling, and you're not going to catch me like, making a ton of references, but that I at least felt was apt to the situation. Yeah, I mean it so far, but it's at least apt to the situation, and things will probably change a little bit for Tim Stutzle because he's going to be under a microscope. But you could continue to do this. It's a very viable strategy in the NHL. And, at least props to Brendan Gallagher for weaving a really fun tale with some really funny quotes overall. Because definitely, and I also, saw that you should watch his watch it instead of listening to the quote, because his facial expressions add so much to the story. So
it's great.
Props to Brendan Gallagher for, bringing this to light, but also weaving a really fun tale while he's at it.
I mean, it's a veteran move by Gallagher, and it is great entertainment. It definitely felt like a bit of a work to make another wrestling reference. But let's move on from that, because next up, we're going to talk about some recently eliminated teams from the NHL's playoffs and see what went wrong, essentially. But first, I got to tell you about Built Bar. This is the time of the year we're like a quarter of the way through it, maybe even a little bit more, where I've given up on all of my New Year's resolutions. But not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of the best tasting Built Bars yet. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. So good, these are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, Puffs included, 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. Go to Built.com and scroll down to the macros chart and you'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has about 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It'll be delicious, and it'll be good for you. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it delicious first, and then they worry about trying to make it healthy after. I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every time. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. So, Mary, we've lost the New Jersey Devils, Chicago Blackhawks, and Seattle Kraken to history or the draft lottery.
They're gone now.
They're gone. They're eliminated. I mean, the Blackhawks, nobody would complain at this point, right? Yeah. Like, we're ready for them to just move, get out of here, be sold to a different person. There's so much about the Blackhawks. I mean, you know what? We don't even need to talk about what went wrong with the Blackhawks.
We know what went wrong.
Everything went wrong with the Blackhawks. You know what I will say about the Blackhawks? I think a little bit less of Marian Hossa right now.
Oh,
Him signing the 1-day contract to retire as a Blackhawk this season, Marian? You're going to do that now?
I mean, okay, from his perspective, I get it, because how many Stanley Cups did he win with that team?
Sure.
So,
wait till next year, though.
Yeah. I mean, like, he hasn't been playing hockey for years, so, like, you know, I think he just wants to move on.
Wait another year.
I get it from our perspective, but from his perspective, I mean, I don't know. When you're entrenched in that organization for so long at this point.
But he was on that team.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I
know. The whole Kyle Beach incident. Like,
I know.
I just can't see if I was his agent, I don't know if he's a publicist, but like any of those people that are involved in his life, if I was his wife, if I was even moderately aware of.
Some people just don't care.
Yeah, and that's why I think a little bit less of him.
Probably just sees it as like a win, a PR win.
Oh yeah, it's 100% how they're viewing it, 100%. But I think a little bit less of Marian Hossa now, and he's a player that I absolutely friggin' loved watching, you know, and I'm just a little bit disappointed. It's not like a major thing on his behalf. Like, it's not cancelable, as they say, even though cancel culture does not exist.
You're not mad, you're just disappointed, Andrew.
Exactly. It's like a parent with a kid.
Yeah, I get it.
He's like a teen. It's like a teen that stole the car and got in an accident.
He's older than you.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes,
he's like in his 40s, I think.
Like at least a decade older than me. But still, I'm disappointed in you, Marian Hossa. All right, moving on from the Blackhawks. The Seattle Kraken. I mean, what could have gone more wrong for them in goal? I don't think anybody predicted Philippe Grubauer to go from nominated for the Vezina. I think he was nominated anyway. To worst goalie in the entire league.
I think it says a lot about the Colorado Avalanche defense. And, you know, it's almost like the Carolina Hurricanes in that you take a goalie out of that system, they're not going to be as good because their defensive system is, you know, pretty rock solid. I mean, the Avalanche and the Hurricanes, like the Hurricanes just feel like the best at that to me. But the Avalanche, you know, have, I think, a pretty good defensive system. But, of course, nobody, I think, would have predicted, you know, Grubauer just falling off a cliff. And so did a lot of things about this team. I mean, now that we've got, you know, the benefit of hindsight, in terms of like their like what they did with the expansion draft, they certainly did stuff, Andrew. And we'll see if in the future, the things that they did pan out, because they certainly wanted a specific type of team identity, but it just never came together. They were never going to be the Golden Knights in terms of success. It was never going to be like that. But, you know, a lot of things did go wrong for them in terms of like, it seems where they prioritized players. But, you know, if you're starting out like, you know, building a team this way, they've got like, I think they've got a whole bunch of draft picks coming up. If not this year, then next year. Like they've stockpiled a ton of draft picks. So, you know, sure, they're not a great team. They're still, you know, their branding is fun. Everything about like around them in terms of like, you know, what they've done for the Seattle area is still cool. But like, we'll see how it goes in the future with this team, because they really aren't going to be competitive. And I don't think they're trying to be. Like, I mean, sure, they're going to try and win hockey games, but like they are not setting out. The mentality between them and Vegas could not be any more different. Vegas is like sacrifice everything to win a Stanley Cup at all costs. Seattle is like, we'll get going when we want to. We have this. They have like seems like a methodical plan, but it definitely went wrong this year, and there were definitely things they could have done better, and players they could have picked that could have been better for them. So like, you know, it was a bad year for them, but
yeah. I'm a fan of Vince Dunn, but not taking Vladimir Tarasenko looks like a huge mistake.
Yeah, there were a lot of huge mistakes. I still don't get why they didn't take JVR from the Flyers. Like, I mean, I know JVR hasn't been the best, but who did they even take from the Flyers? It was like some nobody AHL. It
was like a non-roster player, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't think he's made any sort of impact at all with Seattle. I would bet you anything he probably has played less than 10 games with Seattle, if that. So there's a lot of things they could have done better. I don't think that they'd be incredibly well. I don't know. The West is kind of a weird tire fire this year, so maybe
There
had they
there
been
was a there was an ability, like there was a chance
yeah,
to get in there
yeah,
in the West. I think the weird thing about the West and East right now is it's almost an argument of like what's better, having parity at the top where like the East has 6 really 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 good teams that could all beat each other. You don't know who could be the best, and then they have like another tier of like just 2 teams, and then a lot of parity in the bottom of the teams that aren't making the playoffs, or in the West where there's like the 2 very top teams in Calgary and Colorado, and Vegas would normally be there if they were 100% healthy, but they wouldn't be cap compliant, so they wouldn't be there anyway. And then you have a huge swath of teams where there's a lot of parity between like 3rd and like 12th in the conference. There's a lot. So like what is more entertaining? And I feel like Seattle could have slid into that second tier of competing for a playoff spot, but their goaltending just let them down. Like just looking at a natural stat trick right now, Seattle is actually the 12th best defensive team in the league.
Wow.
In terms of expected goals against. Like we talked about it before the season, right?
Yeah.
They were going to be a tough team to score on, but they're
goaltending
27th in goals against. Like it's real bad.
Yeah, it does suck. I mean, who did they have? They have Grubauer. They have somebody else too.
Chris Drieger.
Right. Yeah, from Florida last year, who was like really, really like lights out for a while. I don't know what his score line is, or like his stat line is, but it's probably not great considering
899.
Yeah. So they just experienced bad goaltending. Like like we said, the Seattle's biggest strength is their defense. And I mean, Dave Haxtell did a lot of really good things with Toronto's defense. When he was part of when he was an assistant coach there. So I definitely remember saying that their defense is probably going to be pretty or at least better than average than most teams. Their goaltending really let them down. I don't know what they're like on offense in terms of the metrics, but my guess is it's probably it's clear that they can't outscore their problems, unlike the Florida Panthers, who can outscore their goaltending problem.
They're frankly, I mean, they're a Hackstall team, so they are extraordinarily boring to watch. I think that's the biggest thing. I think, Vegas was handed a better situation just by teams being super dumb and giving them a lot of assets for free.
Yeah.
And Seattle was not able to take advantage of that. Like, they have no extra first-round picks over the first 3 years of their organization, which sucks. But at the same time, Vegas, I will give them credit, came out of the guns blazing, trying to make an entertaining thing. And I know Seattle is selling out still because it's new, but I think if they don't figure things out relatively quickly and give an entertaining brand of hockey, they may not. You only have a couple of years window where everybody wants the new hotness if it's still garbage. Like the product on the ice is not great.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to project how many years out, I don't remember how long Hackstall signed as a coach. Will he, make it past his contract? Who's to say? Maybe he's just the coach that, gets them started and then they move on to somebody else because, the coaching shelf life isn't, there's a lot of turnover in this league. So it's very possible that, they're like, you're not the guy, and then move on. So yeah. I don't know. The Kraken are still at least, fun from a branding perspective, and it's, still new. Seattle's got a great, their arena's really cool too, from everything I've seen. They've got a good situation there. Hopefully, they start to capitalize more. Hopefully, I think they're going to be better next year. I don't think that this goaltending will be as bad as it was this year. So here's hope.
And lastly, we have New Jersey, who are, worse than I think most people expected them to be. I wonder if they're just kind of a victim of, Jack Hughes is out now. They've had trouble staying healthy. The goaltending hasn't been very good as well. I think they've made significant progress if you look at their underlying numbers. Dougie Hamilton missed a bunch of time this year as well, I believe. They're definitely a rebuilding
he's at 50
team.
Games. Yeah, Dougie Hamilton's at 50 games right now, so he missed time.
Yeah, so they're a rebuilding team that I think is headed in the right direction, but they need to figure out what their identity is as a team.
Mm-hmm.
They just have like a bunch of good pieces, but I don't know. I find it hard to not be positive just because Jack Hughes is just freaking
Yeah, I
incredible.
mean, Jack Hughes is now out for the season, but he had his best season this year. 56 points in 49 games, 26 goals.
Yeah.
A lot
Like
of I'm
everyone's
looking
expecting
at
him to be a 40 goal scorer next year, and I'm like, yep, yeah. If you
Yeah,
watch him,
I
yeah,
mean,
that makes sense.
I'm looking at their top goal scorers. They're all like their top 5, or at least points scorers are under 24. And that's really good. And they're same thing for their, top 5 goal scorers this year. They're all under 24. Like
Yeah, they've got
that's
that combination of like the young guys like Hughes and Heishier who are performing, around expectations for a high draft pick, and then you also have guys that are kind of coming out of the woodwork a little bit who maybe you thought were good, who are now really, really good. Like Jesper Bratt is at a point per game. He's just really, really good and fun to watch.
Yeah, and I mean they have decisions to make in the offseason because PK Subban's contract is expiring, and it's probably for the good of their team that they don't bring him back, or at least reevaluate how they use him in their lineup. They have a foundation of good young players on offense. They just need to figure out a way to build around them in a complementary way. They had really bad luck in the goaltending department. I think you said that. Mackenzie Blackwood, injured. I think currently right now they're running with,
Refusing to get vaccinated
yeah,
at the
that's
beginning of the
also,
year.
yeah, that's true too. I mean, Jonathan Bernier, I think I said at the beginning of the season, he was probably going to be the one that had like the most, like a goalie or like a player with the most impact on a new team. And he was doing all right for them. And then he also got injured. So like they've had bad goaltending luck. So if they can shore up that position, with a better player, a more stable tandem. I think that there's, that they're gonna have to make some turnover. A lot of these pieces, like the veteran pieces, I don't think can all stay. But if they build a complementary team around Jack Hughes, who else is here? Jesper Bratt, Nico Heishier has had a 50-point season this year. So I mean, and that's his what I think second best since his rookie season when he hit 20 goals, but he'll likely surpass that as long as he stays healthy for the last like 10 or so games this year. So there's at least some positivity up front for the Devils. They just have to have a smart off season to put it together, because if they don't, they'll probably end up in the same way they did this year, outside looking in on the playoff bubble. They're not going to I don't think next year they're going to be competing with the best of the best, but they can probably fit in, like they can compete with like whichever Washington equivalent we're going to have next year.
Yeah.
For fighting for that, or like at least in that last playoff spot. But I don't know if it'll be the same this year, next year, as it is this year, with basically all the playoff spots locked off. But they could be fighting for that last playoff spot, but they definitely won't be in that top tier, unless they make remarkable changes to their team.
Yeah, both the roster and the support staff.
Mhm.
And lastly, before we move on, Carey Price practiced this morning on
Oh,
Thursday for 54 minutes. I believe now he's been practicing for 3 straight weeks, and he's on the road trip for the Canadiens taking on the Devils, ironically, this evening on Thursday night. This is going to come out on Friday. He's going to be back in this season. It's looking more and more. After his practice today, he was caught with a huge smile on his face. It looks like he's going to come back, and I think this is really good news for both Price, the Montreal Canadiens, and the league, because Price is a big personality in this league.
Yeah. That makes me really happy to see. Obviously, I didn't see that news until you just told me it, because I've been busy this morning. But yeah, that's really cool. I think we talked about when he rejoined the team, how much of a morality boost that could be. We see it didn't really impact them because the team, continued to be bad, as you well know. But, the way they are currently, their mentality is a lot better. They're playing much better hockey than they have all season long. They're at least an enjoyable hockey team to, watch when Cole Caulfield's doing his thing and all the young kids are. So, this will continue to add good, positive morale to this team. I mean, Carey Price is a likable dude, clearly beloved in Montreal. And it is, I, obviously hope the best for him. And we'll see what the future holds. But, I keep thinking about our conversation because I think it was last week when we talked about, the first 3 teams eliminated with, Arizona, Montreal, and Philadelphia. And, I still keep thinking about how Laura was right in that, optimism is high on the Canadiens' future. You guys have a lot to look forward to. Yeah. So, brighter days are coming for Montreal. And, I think you survived the worst you possibly could, Andrew. I think you made it through. I think you've made it through the woods, and you can, see, the sun in the distance. So better days are coming for the Canadiens. It was rough for a while, but better days are coming.
It was a bad 45 game stretch. It was pretty rough to watch those games. But moving on, we're gonna talk about how bad NHL reffing is and a former ref's opinion on that narrative. But before we go to break, I'm just gonna relay this in case Mary hasn't heard it, because it's coming across my timeline here, is that Ketanji Brown Jackson is going to be confirmed to the Supreme Court in the USA. So that's some good news, because it seemed like they were going to try to shut that down, but they got enough votes. So we'll go into the break talking about or thinking about that something good is happening in the US of A. We don't get much good American news these days in terms of politics. But before we talk about the reffing situation, well, something that reffing can impact a lot: betting. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's Masters Championships odds, podcasts, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, Mary, the big thing that I noticed this morning as I was getting ready for the show was a couple of writers out of Montreal were just talking about how reffing in the playoffs is atrocious, because essentially the way that the NHL allows games to be managed is that star players get hacked and whacked to bits, and you basically have these narratives that come up that, like, you have to play tougher in the playoffs because, it's harder to score in the playoffs and tighter checking, but a lot of it comes down to players get away with a lot more. Well, former ref Dave Jackson did not like this. So he took a screenshot of this conversation and he said, "Tons of respect for you guys, but I got to spoil your narrative. Here's the last 5 years of power plays per game in the regular season versus the playoffs. More power plays per game in the playoffs every year, except for last season, where it's off by 0.29%. Your perception is not reality. Sorry." And he proceeded to post the power plays per game in the regular season versus the playoffs over the last couple of years. Now, first of all, his numbers are wrong, because he's got this regular season, I don't know if it's just old, as more penalties per game than last year. And it's about this. It's almost the exact same, but slightly lower. So that's wrong. But the other thing is, he's completely ignoring the context of the situation. And he followed it up with this, frankly, like, all due respect to you, Dave Jackson, completely insane take, saying, "My point is that refs don't put their whistles away. Also, players are much more disciplined and aware in the playoffs. They tend not to take lazy or unneeded penalties. I think some people equate tight checking and lack of space with a need for more calls." No, Dave. Give me a break. Players are more disciplined in the playoffs. Come on. Come on. Maybe they're more aware of not taking certain kinds of penalties, but they have everything at stake in the playoffs. They cheat more. Anybody with eyeballs can tell you that in the playoffs, there's way more hooking, there's way more slashing, there's way more interference. Like, interference goes from, like, 5 or 6 times a game in the regular season to like 50 times a game in the playoffs. It's not even close. So the whole point of this idea that officiating, like, refs let a lot go in the playoffs as compared to the regular season, yeah, it doesn't matter that it doesn't bear out in raw numbers. It's because the number of infractions is way higher in the playoffs. Like, what are we even talking about when we're going to pretend that there are fewer infractions in the playoffs? What are we watching here? Don't piss in my face and tell me that it's raining, Dave Jackson. Bull.
That's certainly a quote, Andrew. I don't really have anything. I don't think I can follow up with that. Like, that was just.
Is that a Canadian saying only? The piss in my face thing?
I don't think so. Maybe, I don't know. I've never heard it before, or maybe I have, but coming from you, that was just incredible timing, just perfect.
In Saskatchewan, where it's really windy because there's no mountains and not as many forests in southern Saskatchewan, they say don't piss in the wind and say it's raining.
All right. I guess that makes sense. I will have to look up after this if it is a Canadianism or if it is, more widespread than that. But yeah, it's it's an interesting topic. It always, like I said, it always goes back to officiating. Everything stems back to the NHL's poor officiating, and it extends to the playoffs too. We've seen it. I think you've made a good point that they try and get away with more because they have everything to lose in the playoffs. Like, you are fighting for your playoff lives every single game. That's why the intensity is so high. And we've talked about how more penalties will mean more power plays, which means more scoring. We've seen the through line of this throughout the years of how, more penalties, more power plays, more scoring, more fun. That's what people want in the playoffs. You want the high intensity, exciting games. Also, you want the games to be called fairly and justly. And you've seen I know he says in his tweet that the refs don't put their whistles away. Yes, they do. They absolutely 100% do, especially if it's like a tied game in the third period. They do all this type of micromanaging of the game. We've seen it. I think officials have stated it. Who was it? Was it Tim Peel? We talked about this. This was last year. Wasn't it Tim Peel that was called on
essentially
a hot mic?
Fired?
Yeah, for essentially managing the game in that way. Yep. We have evidence this exists. And to say otherwise, like, I know NHL refs probably feel attacked in in terms of hockey fans saying that they don't know how to do their jobs. That they probably are feeling attacked with all of their criticisms. But I know a lot of the criticisms are probably just hockey people dunking on them because funny or angry or whatever. But a lot of this criticism comes from good faith. We want to make the sport better. And changing the way the NHL officiates its games will make the sport better. I think we're at least the two of us are criticizing from a point of wanting the sport to be better because we like a lot of things about it. There are a lot of things we don't like. Don't get us wrong. But this is a point that, as we've said, things cascade because the NHL's officiating is poor. And also, this is a mandate from the NHL, from, Gary Bettman himself and George Peros.
It's not about just the refs.
Yeah. This is the refs are just the arms that are making things, move and happening. But Gary Bettman and George Peros are the ones making the decisions here. When we call out the refs, we're calling out, the system itself. We're not saying that every ref is bad. There are a lot of good refs. Wes McCauley is beloved in the NHL, or at least by NHL fans, or a lot of them anyway. Not everybody, but a lot of them love him for a reason. He's personable. He seems to be the most fair referee too, from what I have seen. So that's probably also why.
There's certain refs who maybe fans wouldn't think are fair either that are very good at communicating with players, right? I think that's a big part of their job that we don't see. Or at least don't get to experience, is them telling players, maybe a soft call gets called against a player, but they've been warned 3 or 4 times during the game. Mm-hmm. Don't make that play. And then the ref's like, well, you made that play again. I'm going to call you this time, even if it's a little bit soft. So there's some of that to it too, but
isn't easy. Refereeing is not easy. It is no. It's a thankless job. It's probably the most thankless job in hockey, if I had to guess.
Coaching.
Maybe
coaches get fired more often.
True, but you see more overall vitriol from the hockey community overall directed at referees than, because
Oh, for sure.
you get certain fan bases mad at coaches and whatnot, but you only have to deal with it from your fan base or your city. But everybody has an opinion on the refs, and you get they get dogpiled on Twitter and social media, and through other fandom spaces. It's a thankless job. They're In a perfect world, the referees not wouldn't be noticeable, but wouldn't be the topic of conversation. If if the NHL mandate was different in terms of how they call their games, we wouldn't be having these conversations about the way the games are called, because they would be called the way they should, with getting things out of the game that we don't want. And then, sure, there would be a lot more whistles, but they would be earned whistles. And maybe play would change, but I don't know. In the perfect world, we wouldn't be talking about referees this much. We don't want to be talking about this, Andrew. I mean, you wanted to talk about it because
No.
you wanted to talk about you wanted to have your hot take and your funny Canadianism. But we don't want to be talking
I
about
didn't plan that
refereeing.
part, but it
I
just
know,
came out.
still, but we want to be talking about the game of hockey, which we like talking about. We don't want to be talking about refereeing controversies every 5 minutes. So it isn't a personal attack on referees when we talk about them. We're criticizing that the way the game is managed, and that it comes direct from Gary Bettman and George Parros, and that is where the real criticism lies. Sure, Tim Peel was maligned much in the same way Joe West was in baseball. But that there are outliers to that, but it is not overall the ref's fault. This is the mandate from on high. That is the problem here.
Yeah, I enjoy that we're actually getting some refs' perspectives out there
Yeah.
in media nowadays. But when I hear it put this way, I think, maybe you are a bigger part of the problem than I previously have said. Because I've been operating under the narrative or the idea that refs are the people who execute the will of the league, right? But refs also have biases in and of their own. And
I think I was
with
making
Dave
a
Jackson,
blanket statement that does not apply to all of them. There are definitely some that are acting in as the hand or arm of the league, just doing
and the other thing is, when
stuff.
you've been doing something a certain way for 20 years, you likely believe that what you're doing is right. Yeah. Which is why, refs are the cops of the NHL, and that's why we have to always be on them, because they're awful. Anyway, we'll wrap that up there. We'll get to our pop culture segment in a moment, but first I got to tell you about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why endure pointless or often seemingly intimidating questioning while you waiting for the person behind the counter to get the parts from their computer, choosing only the brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% markup on the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is also a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything that you could need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts that your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, Mary, I did not take in a lot of pop culture since we last spoke. The one thing that I did watch was the new episode of Moon Knight, which I don't know if you've seen.
I haven't yet. Sorry. Like I said.
Have you watched the first episode?
No. How is it? I've heard I don't want to say mixed things about the first episode, but I've heard that Oscar Isaac is kind of the standout here. I mean, he's just also a very charismatic actor. And a very attractive one too. So it is something I am intrigued about watching. But how was the second episode? I think I heard much better things.
Okay, I actually like the first episode more.
Okay,
the first episode, the second episode was good. It was fine, but it was a bit more humor in it.
Okay.
And the tone of the first one was much more like scary, surreal, and like out of body experience, and dealing with like the terror of the main character who is not in control of his body at all times, right? Oscar Isaac is definitely doing Oscar Isaac things. Like he's that guy. There will be many thirst traps made about Oscar Isaac in this series for sure. There's a lot of the end of the second episode, I think, will be on many Oscar Isaac highlight reels on TikTok and all that.
I love how you call like fan edits or fan cams highlight reels.
Highlight reels, yes, it's the sports in me.
That makes me laugh so much. I as an aside, I also love how hockey. I see a lot of hockey Twitter and fan cams. I guess I kind of am in that little like niche space. I think that's really cool that that's a big thing in hockey. But regardless, and you can continue with your Moonlight or Moon Knight, not
Yeah,
Moonlight, Moon Knight thing. So
I don't want to go into too many spoilers, but I'm liking where they're going. I'm excited to see where they're going. And I know that the showrunner and director of, I think, 5 of the 6 episodes, not the second one, is Egyptian. He's an Egyptian filmmaker. So I think that's really cool to have that perspective of it, because it is a story rooted in ancient Egyptian lore. So they're trying to take it very seriously from that perspective as well, and represent Egypt very well. So I'm excited to see what they can do with it, because it's territory that hasn't really been covered through the MCU so far.
It seems more unique in terms of like, I don't know. I think I mentioned this. It's more like of an out there concept, much in the same way WandaVision or Loki is. I mean,
yeah.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Hawkeye were more grounded, I guess, in terms of current reality, I think. So it's neat that we're getting more unique Marvel stuff. Because I saw they released another teaser trailer for the new Doctor Strange movie, and I am intrigued about that because that looks like it is gonna be one of the wackiest mind-bending Marvel films of them all. And I'm glad that they're doing more of the unique stuff. It may not always work, but I'm glad that they're trying to throw more stuff at the wall, because they've earned, I think, that trust from their fans that they can go a bit more wacky. They can't just do it right out of the gate, because it will turn some people away. But now that we know the Marvel formula, they've got an established base of fans. They could do more stuff like this, I guess, take more risks essentially, and whatnot. So that it's cool. I would like to watch it. I just have not had the time. How long are the episodes at least?
They're longer. I think the first one was 45 minutes and this one was 52.
Okay, so it's more of like the standard drama format.
Yes. Yeah, it's more consistently long than some of the other I think they're all around like 45 minutes plus.
Maybe it'll be something I download on like my phone if I'm awake. If I'm awake on my flights to California, maybe I'll watch it. Maybe I'll download Netflix, or not Netflix, Disney Plus. Because did they do like offline viewing? I'd have to find out. But regardless, maybe that's something.
I think you can on Disney, but I've never really used it. But before we close out, did you have anything you wanted to mention?
No, like I said, been getting ready for my California trip, been playing same video games, Elden Ring, been back into Final Fantasy 14. By the time I come back, there will be a new, I think I said, story patch. So like, a bit more story. It's cool about playing an MMO is the story it just doesn't end. You can get like new story content every handful of months. And I think that's one of the neatest things as somebody who's new to MMOs and is like, the story just keeps going. I don't have to wait like a handful of years for like the sequel. Like it just like they just keep like adding
people who buy NHL games every year. Like what? They can just update things?
Oh, I don't want to. I feel bad. Like I should play more sports games than I do. But it is, I don't know, maybe it's because I use video games as like I don't know. I try not to mix the two. Like I do write about video games every so often, but like I try not to mix the two. I try and use the time I play video games for myself, and sometimes playing it with friends or enjoying it with friends. But I try and use it as like a separate thing, because I think it's good to have things like the big thing is like don't monetize your hobbies. Things like that should just be for yourself, like reading, doing like arts and crafts stuff like gardening. Some people use writing as that, but writing is my profession. So it's not something I can do, but it's nice to keep some things, to yourself that, you don't necessarily have to share with other people, or, try and monetize the hell out of it in the way our capitalist society makes you think you can do. So, it's good to have stuff like that.
And we've brought it full circle back to the Communist Manifesto
Hey,
wrestling
look
hockey
at that.
Twitter.
We did it. We did it.
And with that, it's time to end. Thank you for tuning into the Cross-Check NHL Show, and thanks for making us your first listen every Tuesday and Friday. Now, let's make your next listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free wherever you get your podcasts.